Welcome to It's a Controls Problem, where we do precision guesswork based upon unreliable data given to us by those of questionable knowledge. I'm your host, Charles Johnson. Welcome to It's a Controls Problem. I am your host, Charles Johnson, and I'm here with producer extraordinaire Matthew Vanberg and a very special guest here, Mr. Greg Fitzpatrick. And he is the business development leader for building IoT and integration at Cochrane Supply of Engineering. He's been in the business for over 30 years of building system in the control industry. And he has held such roles as principal at a consulting engineering firm, senior sales engineer for major equipment manufacturers, and even, I believe, chief mechanical design commissioning manager for facilities for a large school district, if I'm not mistaken. And in 2022, Greg was appointed executive director for Real Estate Cyber Consortium, or RECC for short, where he promotes what we call cyber harmony, which is providing leadership on best practices and policies for procedures for real estate owners, operators, and solution providers. And now Greg spearheaded the creation of smartbuildingdesign.com, which is a platform for offering resources and specifications to assist consulting engineers, network designers, and even system integrators for designing effective and secure networks for smart buildings. So Greg, really big welcome here. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on the show, guys. Pretty excited to chat this afternoon. There's quite a bit to chat about. I'm excited about where cyber is actually going in our industry in the OT space, and looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, do you want to give a little insight into what your actual responsibility is at Cochrane Supply?
Yeah, well, Cochrane Supply and Engineering, we're a distributor, but I like to call us a distributor of IoT and integration hardware and software solutions, right? So any and everything OT, we'd like to be your trusted advisor. And I work in business development for IoT and integration. So it includes everything from Niagara to our smart building solutions and cyber solutions that we sell to both consulting engineers, or we specify to consulting engineers and sell to systems integrators and provide support to end users. So that's my role at Cochrane Supply and Engineering. I've been there for 7 years now, and also taken on a new role with the Real Estate Cyber Consortium, as you mentioned, the RECC for short. And I was appointed their executive director 2 years ago in 2023, I believe it is. So I'm going into year 3 and very excited about that.
Well, good. Definitely a big welcome here, and I appreciate you taking your time out of the day. And obviously, you worked all day, and you're taking some time here at night to chat with us, folks. And I really do appreciate that. I mean, it shows some dedication as to that you want to spread the word, about. And so really the first question I have for you, Greg, is to start, could you share with our listeners about how you got first pulled into this fascinating and, well, quite frankly, sometimes frustrating world of building controls? So, like, what initially sparked your interest?
Well, Scott Cochrane and I met years ago when I was in a previous role as the chief mechanical design manager for a large program management team that managed, I think it was $1.3 billion for a large school district here in Michigan. And we also had, I think, over 110 buildings at the time. And I think at the time, Scott Cochrane had just picked up the Tritium's Niagara line. And, he made a sales call to the district. I thought it was sorcery initially, like everyone else in the industry, but became very, very interested in it. We did some pilot projects, pulled a ton of schools into, Niagara's platform, and it went on from there. And Scott and I had a relationship. I was his customer for years, and I think 7 years ago, I was approached about coming over there and working in business development. I had worked for facilities group VP of facilities for a large construction management company. Left that position, went on to coach my son for about a year to get him prepared for high school football, and took a break from work and bumped into Scott Cochrane, and I've been with Scott for the last 7 years. And one thing about building technology, it's ever growing, right? I spent time as a consulting engineer. I think I've sold equipment for both train and carrier, equipment controls, turnkey projects, and the whole 9 yards. I worked as a commissioning agent, ran my own firm for a while. And everything always comes back to the building management systems, right? And now that things have become more and more sophisticated, it's a lot more interesting. So, later in my career, after I chatted with Scott for a while, I thought that where smart building design was going was enough to keep me interested for probably the next 10 years or so.
Okay. It's interesting how what I really love about bringing people into the podcast is really hearing their story. I'm very passionate about controls. It's pretty much all I talk about. And even sometimes out of work, I talk about controls. It's just such a fun. It's just such a fun industry where we learn so much about so many different things. And as you said, as the building automation industry continues to change and grow over time, so do the different needs. And so we now have to learn about so many different things, especially when it comes to IoT and security. And speaking of security, what was there a specific moment, and maybe in hindsight, did something turn out to be what we call a glaring security issue, in the built environment that you were working in?
Not really. I just think that now that our industry is evolving and with the emergence of IP devices, right? And more remote connectivity, I think cyber has just become a huge issue because we're connecting more and more devices to the owner's network. Systems integrators are now learning how to stand up their own IP networks, but there's also remote connectivity associated with those IP networks. So we're trying to educate the not only the consulting engineering community, but also the integrators on cyber hygiene, right? And how important cyber is to their customers. And a lot of integrators are still on the fence when it comes to cybersecurity and using tools that aren't as secure for remote access. And what we're trying to do is teach them some of the principles of zero trust. A lot of integrators still feel like, hey, look, if there's a cyber incident, we'll just let our insurance take care of it, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't really think that cyber is important until it is important. And when you look at OT vulnerabilities that are out there and look at the different systems, everything from HVAC to lighting, surveillance systems, access control, elevators, the whole 9 yards, there's vulnerabilities and risk associated with all of those systems and all of those controls, whether they're sitting on the owner's network or they're in the standalone OT network that's totally air gapped from the owner's IT environment. So what we're doing now is just trying to slowly but surely educate our entire industry on what it means to be cyber secure, because IP devices are being adopted a little slower than we originally thought, right? And a lot of systems integrators are still hell-bent on deploying BACnet MSTP. There's manufacturers that are starting to, implement secure by design practices in their products and things like that. AshRay and BACnet have come out with BACnet SC, but there's still, issues with certificate management and things like that. So what we're trying to do is just start off at the basics when it comes to cybersecurity, and that's what the whole cyber harmony thing was all about.
Okay. So, one thing that's interesting, when you're talking about this, especially from a BAS system and having, and having the integrators kind of, some really care about it and some don't currently. And you're right, where people care. Some people only care about when it needs to be had. I was actually teaching an N4 class in May
Mm-hmm.
of last year, and it was actually for an automated logic dealer. And in the middle of that, they had gotten a call that someone had actually hacked into the web control front end for a hospital and took it over. And the hospital ended up paying, um, a hospital ended up actually paying out just to get it back because it was ransomware.
Ransomware, yeah.
Um, and so, I think I think of a thing by that is, have you come across with any interesting security breach stories?
Well, from time to time, I will hear some when we discuss things that are amongst the members at the RECC, but everything's pretty much private there, right? Everything's behind closed doors, so we don't discuss it publicly. And that's one thing about this about cybersecurity and the in our industry. There's I think there's measures in place and policies in place where you have to expose or report on incidents, right? And then there's threat intelligence that's out there. But a lot of companies aren't really quick to share their stories, because of because of damages to their brands, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, no one wants to come out publicly and say in a room full of 300 people that they had a cyber breach, but they happen, right?
Yep.
And some of them are public, because of the reporting that's required by some of the reporting agencies. And, I don't pretend to be an IT person, but, I get a lot of this stuff secondhand through the RACC. And I think what's happening now is there's different ISACs that are out there, information sharing analysis centers that report on these incidents. But for me personally, I don't really have any stories, to talk
Yeah.
about. But we do. But I do see them publicly. I mean, all you have to do is open up LinkedIn and you will see breaches every other day. You'll see a cyber incident being reported every other day. And I follow a lot of sites that are associated with cybersecurity, and we share that information with the RICC members also.
Yeah, when I'm training, one thing I always bring up is the data breach of Target, right? Like that was, I think, one of the first real kind of glimpse into, into ensuring up networks, especially from a BAS system, because it happened on a BAS text laptop, supposedly.
Yeah.
I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think it was kind of an inside job, and I have my reasons as to why I think it was more of an inside job. But the I had a customer here in Charleston where my the company I used to work for and a competitor of ours were actually in the same core and shell space. And so we had gotten the core, and they had gotten a fair amount of the tenants in the building, because Bank of America was actually, um, they held the fifth floor and even
Hmm.
parts of the fourth floor. And so because that contractor was there, they're like, well, we really like this one. So the customer was actually using them over and over again. Well, they implemented a supervisor, and I got a call from the owner, or from the customer, and they said, "Hey, have you ever put a VPN, like a Microsoft VPN on a laptop?" I'm like, or I mean a desktop. I was like, once, while I was stupid, way back in the day,
Nice.
sure. I was like, but I would never do that now. They're like, well, they did that here, and someone got a hold of the computer, and I'm like, front row Raggy. Um, and sometimes it takes those it takes those things to finally get people to wake up and smell the coffee. Another thing I actually show people, now I don't show them my personal account on this, but I actually show them Shodan.io. Um, and when I just type in tritium, and then they sit there and they see all the IP addresses that come through, and displaying, hey, they're using this version of Workbench, and they've got these, it's like, oh, it's backend enabled and stuff like that, and you're like, how scary is that, in the real world? And speaking of the zero trust here, what is the zero trust cyber harmony as a whole? And can you really break that down just in the context of the BAS world?
Yeah. When you talk about cyber harmony is a term that I came up with a couple years ago. I was asked to write an article about the RECC going into Realcom, and it was going to be highlighted at our cyber forum that we have as a pre-con event there. And I came up with the concept of cyber harmony. It's pretty simple, and it's the concept of getting IT and facility, or IT in the construction world, on the same page when it comes to things like best practices, right? When it comes to things like best practices, OPR documents, right? Owner's project requirement documents, what kind of information should be put in that document and passed down to the to all the stakeholders that could be involved in OT deployment, the OT products, right? Third party risk management, fourth party risk management, and sometimes fifth party if you're talking about a commissioning agent that's involved. Protocols, specifications, drawings. What do the drawings look like? What are the IT and OT policies, right? And what are the cyber commissioning procedures? So when you're looking at cyber harmony, you're talking about everyone from the master systems integrator to the OT manufacturer, right, of those products, the engineer of record, the mechanical engineer, the design engineer who's actually putting together the specifications, whether it's division 23, 25, sometimes 27, 26 are involved. The owner, who's the major stakeholder, or the end user, general contractors, CMs, and the commissioning agent. All of these stakeholders can be involved in one project. And it's the owner's primary responsibility to pass on, to make sure that cyber is embedded in every specification, right? So in other words, here's a project on the construction team. Someone from IT should be involved in passing along an owner's project requirement that has cyber requirements that should get embedded into division 25, 26, 27, whatever technology is being integrated into their built environment, that cyber language should be put in that specification. So when you're talking about cyber harmony, it's just the concept of getting our entire industry. And, our industry has been segmented between IT and construction, right? Most IT people are familiar with the construction process. Most IT departments don't talk to facilities, right? And facilities are putting out projects where there's a consulting engineer involved and there's technology being deployed in their built environment. And the only thing the design engineer is asking for is IP drops for maybe a couple gateway devices like a Jace, right?
Okay.
Or server space, for their web supervisor. But when you're talking about that, you're still talking about contractors who have service contracts who are coming back and accessing those systems. So are those systems being accessed via a VPN that the owner gives them, or is it being remotely accessed by some type of tool that they're using? Whether it's a TOSI box or a product like Neve. Neve is more secure. Neve is a product that we actually sell now, and it uses zero trust principles. So when you're talking about zero trust and you're talking about true remote access that's cyber secure, you want a product or a solution that uses zero trust principles. That means never trusting any user, any device, or any system by default. In other words, whether it's inside or outside of the network, instead of assuming that those systems are secure, every access request should always be verified and then continuously verified throughout its movement through the network, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, so in other words, I kind of look at it when I explain it to consulting engineers. It's just like card access, right? You got a badge, you come in, you swipe your badge. Well, your badge should only get you, say it's a 1 million square foot facility. Your badge should only get you into the areas where you have access or you're authorized to be. So in other words, once you're in that building, you can only move and go where you're allowed to move and go. And that's how zero access should work, right? There should be strict access controls to make sure users and devices only have minimum permissions. It should verify at every step, not just at login, right? After you log in, you should still have these devices and that data verified as it's moving through the network, right? You also need to worry about network segmentation and things like that, whether it's just mere segmentation or micro segmentation. You just want to make sure that IT and OT is separated, and so that these devices that are on the OT network can move laterally and get to the IT network. So there's a lot of things that are involved when it comes to zero trust, even real-time monitoring, right? Detecting and responding to anything weird happening on the network or any anomalies, before they actually end up causing damage. Like those are the things that we look at when we're looking at solutions to sell to our systems integrators. And it has to be something that integrators can understand, because you know how contractors are. They want the easy button, right? They want the easy button. And a lot of people are busy. They don't have time to just learn new technology or learn technology that's more IT centric. So we are always looking for solutions that are OT centric and easy to be deployed by our systems integrators.
And I think that's a good point as well. But one thing that you touched on is about being a trusted advisor. So, for me, obviously, when people are coming to, us or you or whomever, for solutions, how do we, how do we make the how do we get them to understand the consequences and repercussions without having the comprehensive, or without having them experience those consequences and repercussions? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, what kind of pushback do you tend to get to hear? What kind of pushback do you hear from integrators and end users alike?
Well, when it comes to end users, my situation is a little different because of my involvement with the RECC. So, the RECC is made up of IT professionals, right, who are at the top of the food chain. Like I said, CISOs, CTOs, and CIOs, and even some people who work in government. So they understand IT and they understand security. So there's really no pushback from that group. But remember, those people also report to CEOs, right? So they have to go to their leadership to get them to invest dollars in cyber. One of the topics that we'll probably broach at our cyber forum at Realcom is how to sell cyber to the C-suite, right? A tactical approach on how you make sure that you get the budget to put the controls in place that you need to make sure that your built environment is secure. And when it comes to contractors, and you know how like our industry works, right?
Mhm.
When it comes to construction, 9.9 times out of 10, unless you're talking about design build, we're talking about plan and spec. Still, the majority of our projects that are out there are still plan and spec. And plan and spec means that if it's not specified and it's not part of the contract documents, the owner didn't buy it, right? Now, we like to believe in a perfect world that everyone's going to use best practices, right? Everyone's going to use the most secure devices. But when you're talking about plan and spec, you're talking about a competitive environment where if, in fact, the the consulting engineer didn't put together a solid set of documents so everyone's bidding apples to apples, then at the end of the day, if the owner didn't specify a zero trust remote access strategy, then that's not what you're going to get 9 times out of 10. And that's why we're trying to start from the top down with making sure that the owners, remember I mentioned that owner's project requirements document, right? We put together a guide that was one of our initiatives within the RACC. We put together a guide. We hired a couple consultants. They put together a guide for the owner's project requirement document. So in other words, I'm the owner. I'm the person or the entity or the main stakeholder who has the IT department. I understand cyber better than every other stakeholder involved in any project that we deploy. So I'm responsible for passing on my cyber requirements to facilities and make sure that that stuff gets embedded in the contract documents, because I don't think that we're just going to be able to tell every systems integrator like, hey, the responsible thing to do is to make sure that you deploy a zero trust solution when considering remote access, when at the end of the day, if they want remote access and they don't feel as though cyber is at the top of their at the top of their concerns, then they're going to get the cheapest solution that's the easiest to deploy, and the most reliable, right? So if no one's telling them that it has to be zero trust, then they're not going to provide a zero trust solution. So what we're trying to do is educate the owners to make sure that that stuff gets in the specifications. And also we're talking to the consulting engineers and letting them know, like, you know as well as I do with that Target breach, right? They went through a third-party HVAC vendor, stole some credentials, installed some malware, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they've got people's credit card numbers, social security numbers, and the whole 9 yards. Well, I'm sure if we dug into it a little deeper and we saw everyone who was drug in the litigation, I'm sure the consulting engineer was drug in litigation also, right? So that's one of the things that we're trying to educate engineers on is that, hey, look, at the bare minimum, let us provide you with a specification that has some of the bare minimums when it comes to cyber hygiene, right? Let us put a remote access strategy into your specification so that you're not dragging a litigation if there is a cyber breach. So it's a tough uphill climb because, cyber is being adopted slow. It's been very, very slow as far as getting people to adopt, proper cyber hygiene. But we're pushing real hard at the RACC. We're pushing real hard at Cochrane to put cyber at the forefront. And I think we're making progress. But slowly but surely, like for instance, we've got a session on zero trust and cyber harmony at our pre-con event for ControlsCon. Right. Every opportunity we get to talk about it, we're talking about it. We're also about to put more information on smartbuildingdesign.com, which is our website at Cochrane, specifically for design engineers. We're about to put more information when it comes to cybersecurity. That's under one of our best practice tabs there, cybersecurity for OT. And we've got a ton of information there. Some of the basics for cyber hygiene, like encrypted data, managed network switches, installing the firewall, and then having a written cybersecurity policy that you can give the owner if they don't have one. So we've got those documents right on our website for anyone to go and download.
So, we've talked about hygiene, but for some of the listeners, can you give just the actual definition of the cyber hygiene that you're talking about?
Just basic cyber practices, right? Basic cyber practices. I just mentioned a few of them, right? Making sure that you've got multi-factor authentication. Making sure when you design a system that you have encrypted data. right? So whether you have encrypted data right at the device level or you have encrypted data um, at the web supervisor, you want to make sure that your data is encrypted, right? Tritium's Niagara has encrypted data at the JACE level and at the web supervisor level. You may want to deploy a backnet SC strategy, right? If
Mhm.
you can figure out the certificate management part of it. But those are some of the basics. If a contractor is installing their own OT network or IP network, make sure that you have managed switches opposed to unmanaged switches, right? Managed switches where you can do things like port security, right?
Mhm.
You can open and close ports and lock IP addresses or MAC addresses in at those ports or close those ports down. You want to make sure that you install a firewall if you have an air gapped if you have an air gapped network and you've got remote access. You want to make sure that you know deploy a zero trust remote access strategy. All of those things are important when you talk about basic cyber hygiene.
Sure. Okay, so we're talking about good segmentation of networks, and really, I think that was one of the reasons why, the target data breach was so important because the network wasn't segmented, right? Like there wasn't a VLAN for the for the BAS side. It was just all was just all open and ripe for the picking. And obviously now, we're seeing a lot of VLANs happening, MFA happening. Um, but I tell you what, let's switch gears here for a moment. Let's go back earlier to your career. What was probably one of your favorite legacy building automation systems that you worked with, and what could be some even just simple zero trust principles that could be applied to that today?
Wow, that's a tough one. That's a tough one because I'm a proponent of open systems. I have to say that I'm a proponent, a huge proponent of open systems. And when you talk about open, you're talking about open protocol, which 9 times out of 10 is back then. Open technology, which I consider Niagara as probably the most well-known technology out there, and everyone's using it and embedded it. But open distribution is that third leg of a true open system. And that's where there's a marketplace of systems integrators who can install, or let's back up, who could purchase, install, program, commission, and maintain the hardware that you select for your building. So, in other words, you're not stuck with one integrator or one company if, in fact, you decide you want to move on from that service contract, right? Or the first installer. So I've been proponent of like open systems. So when we're talking open systems, there's systems like Distech. I remember I ran a commissioning firm years ago, and it was when Distech first came out, and it was a contractor, a local contractor. I think it was WJ O'Neill, local contractor, had installed a Distech system, and I had never heard of Distech. And this was maybe in the early 2000, mid 2000s, maybe,
Hmm.
and I had never heard of Distech. And I remember, and I had commissioned Johnson and a lot of other manufacturers, but I remember like one of the first iterations of Distech back then, I remember thinking like, wow, this is a pretty cool BAS system. And it was easy to commission. And when I went back to do some retro commissioning, you know, everything held true, didn't have any issues. And I remember the contractors really loving Distech back then.
Uh-huh. So, how do you think even some of those, like for example, if we talk about Distech, and Honeywell has their own implementation as well. But like for example, we know that Niagara 4 got rid of tunneling, right? Like tunneling's not really a thing, which people have gotten around by using, wizards. Like for example, GFX, when you launch a wizard through port like 1931, Honeywell, you can just do it directly right through the Jace and even things like workplace tech. So like, how important would it be for even those kind of, let's say, off the wall ports to be even more secure than they are now?
Oh, it's very important. It is very important. And when you think about it, like some of the edge devices and gateways, like this tech uses edge controllers and dedicated gateways, that really securely can push data to the cloud services without even needing direct tunneling. And that's what a lot of people like about this tech, right? Because they use outbound connections over HTTPS or MQTT, which, are a lot more firewall friendly, I've been told by our IT department, right? And then, they use a lot of API based communication also. So instead of like relying on VPN tunnels, like a lot of people are moving everything to the cloud, right?
Okay.
And I think it's inevitable. I really do think it's inevitable. A lot of the large owners that we know, like a Bedrock here in town, they moved all of their OT to the cloud. So, with this tech, I think their cloud platform uses like REST APIs or WebSockets, things like that, to make sure that they're transmitting their data securely, and then making sure that if their data or if their devices are on the owner's network, then they make sure that all of those protocols and passing all of that data is compliant with the enterprise security policies. So that's one thing I really, really do like about uh, this tech. I think that Tritium is the closest to working out the whole BACnet SC mystery, right? And managing all those certificates. So, this tech is one of the companies that I really, really like, and a lot of our contractors like. And they like, yeah, they use a lot of the other products that we have. But, this tech seems to be on one of the companies on the forefront of making sure that they're providing secure by design practices when they're pushing out their new products.
I agree with that. And speaking of backing over SC, I think there is a lot of I think there's a lot of a lot of discussion now with backing over SC, and obviously some manufacturers have been more open with with BACnet or with BACnet SC, which I think came out like 2019,
Yeah.
as as a principle, and a few of them have really kind of embraced BACnet over SC, and we're still getting some kind of pushback. I think one of the things that I think is in discussion for BACnet over SC is whose responsibility is it for managing the certificates, right? Like some
Right.
people think that, well, it's the manufacturer itself. Well, they're the ones that are providing this BACnet over SC, and they should be the ones that are providing the certificates. Whereas, the other side's like, well, you're the one that's implementing BACnet over SC in the first place, regardless of whether or not they provide a BACnet over SC implementation. You're the one that's actually maintaining it on a regular basis. So why aren't you the one that's actually responsible for maintaining? And I think that's probably where it all needs to go, where the manufacturers are like, look, we've done what we can do, at least on this side, but it's really your responsibility to take whatever certificates that you have, because you're probably going to make them anyway, and make it work, on the BACnet side.
No, absolutely. I agree. Like the management of what they call them, the secure nodes and the
Hmm.
hubs.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what's been like one of the big issues that I've heard when I sit and listen to some of the people talk about BACnet SC. Like it's one of the topics that we always bring up when we're talking within the RECC, and we're trying to teach some of the end users uh, what manufacturers are doing for secure by design practices, right? And it's funny because like there's this huge, I think, lack of like awareness and training, right? A lot of facility managers, systems integrators, they're still unfamiliar with it, and I think the adoption has been super duper slow. Like every time we have, I'm involved in a presentation anywhere, and BACnet SC comes up, there'll be a systems integrator who will stand up and he'll tell us all the things that are wrong with it. I mean, it eliminates, you know, clear text communication vulnerabilities and things like that, but it still doesn't provide against insider threats, right? And if someone gains access to like a compromised certificate,
Hmm.
then yeah, you've got issues. You've got issues, and it just seems like it's one more step and one more problem that integrators have to worry about as far as certificate management. I think Tritium has done a good job of figuring out the whole certificate management part of BACnet SC, and I think that our industry is a copycat industry, right? I think there'll be a lot of manufacturers who figure it out, but until it's easier to deploy, I think it's going to move at a snail's pace as far as adoption across our industry.
Well, I think I think it's time for controls companies to adopt, an OT department, right? An OT implementation, because we need to wear multiple hats, right? Like I'm
Absolutely.
finding. Yeah, like I'm finding a lot of, like I'm finding a lot of companies now. And actually, I was just talking about this earlier today, where a lot of companies now they're hiring they're hiring the young guns, and they're smart with computers, but when it comes to mechanical systems, they're clueless. And so, trying to teach people the mechanical systems becomes really tough. But I think another hurdle that contractors have to do is now you need both. You need a group that can just go and install controls and get that stuff working there, and then you need the other side here, especially to help develop the network implementation and zero trust
Absolutely.
and certificate management. Like 414 has done a really good job with the security manager service, where that takes that takes some of the work away, as far as they've made Tritium's made it, as you're right, Tritium made it easier to kind of start doing that implementation. um, I tell you, here's something I think is interesting. Like, I don't know if you know much about the Hope Diamond and how it actually got sent to the Smithsonian. And
No,
so
not at all.
uh, obviously, everyone knew about the Hope Diamond, and they knew that the Smithsonian was going to acquire it. And so, everyone was developing plans of like how they were going to hijack these security trucks and this, that, and the other. How they actually got it to the Smithsonian was just through the United States Postal Service, just straight regular mail,
Oh
because
wow.
no one would have suspected. No one would have suspect. No, everyone suspects the Spanish Inquisition. Like
Right, right.
like so, but no one suspected it. And I kind of chuckled because the days of dial-up is what we had, and well before even the days of internet came up, or actual internet, like broadband and whatnot, right? Like we had modems. It's kind of interesting. Like I for some reason think like people like going back to the days of old. Like, all right, well, everyone is so used to the technology of the age of the internet and IP and subnetting and stuff like that. But like, how many people now remember the days of dial-up and hacking, and hijacking phone lines, right? Like,
Right, right.
it could just be like someone just implements that and they're like, well, we don't have the technology for that anymore. We're well too advanced for that. It's like, well, gotcha there. Um, so let's look at 5 to 10 years ahead. Ahead now. What do you perceive is going to be the most significant evolving cybersecurity risks facing building control systems, especially with increased connectivity and IoT proliferation and trends like smart cities?
I just think there's going to be more and more vulnerabilities, right? The hackers always stay a step ahead. right? And with the emergence of AI now and hackers using AI tools, I just think the vulnerabilities are going to be, a lot greater, and I think the potential risk is going to grow. I mean, when you're looking at potential risk, you're looking at data breaches, data manipulation, financial losses, damage to your reputation, compromised safety. I mean, there's a whole list of them, right? Even disruption of your services within your building. But when you look at the vulnerabilities on the OT side, there's probably somewhere around 10. Everything from inadequate patch management and insecure engineering protocols, remote access policies that we talked about, right, with the whole zero trust, outdated firmware, outdated software, all those things come into play. And I think as buildings become smarter and smarter, it's going to create more and more vulnerabilities and more risk. And that's why we're pushing so hard to connect IT to facilities. One of the things that we talk about quite a bit within the RACC is the need for what we like to call an OT governance team within organizations. So now you're talking about someone from facilities and someone from IT being involved in every OT deployment project that exists within that organization. So anytime there's an OT or construction project that involves an OT deployment, someone from the OT governance team is involved to make sure that those cyber requirements are embedded and followed all the way through commissioning, right? Followed all the way through commissioning. And I just think that it's going to make it more and more complicated, especially with AI. I think AI is probably the biggest mystery right now, right? Because organizations are still trying to figure out, what does AI governance even look like, right? So I just think with AI and the buildings becoming smarter and smarter, I just think that manufacturers are going to have to stay on their toes, and more of the responsibility for cybersecurity is going to reside with the manufacturers, because it's a heavier lift to get an entire ecosystem to shift. Right. So, and when you're talking ecosystem, you're talking about all those stakeholders, the engineers, the CMs, general contractors, commissioning agents, systems integrators. The one stakeholder that can have the biggest impact the quickest will be the OT manufacturer, right, who are developing these products, and I think that's what's happening now.
Well, that's you've really offered a lot of insight. And funny thing about AI that you mentioned, I'm actually I'm releasing an article on Friday about vibe coding.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, I've really kind of gotten into a lot about AI more recently, and we've done a few. We've done a few episodes on AI as well. So, Greg, do you have do you have anything else to add that maybe our audience would like to know about or should know about?
I think it's important that our industry adopts a cyber commissioning process for OT deployments. Like traditional commissioning, commissioning is a third-party verification process for all the systems that are installed, all the OT systems that are installed, whether it's HVAC, lighting, elevators, access control, even and not just the OT systems, but even things like the building envelope are sometimes commissioned. But now one of the things that we're pushing for is cyber commissioning. There's frameworks within NIST and the IEC, I think it's IEC 62443, that has some language as far as commissioning for cyber. But I think what has to happen now is the construction industry and organizations like the BCA, I think it's the Building Commissioning Association, and the AABC, they need to start adopting a commissioning process for cyber, a cyber commissioning process. And it's just like traditional commissioning that starts at the design phase, right, where you just ensure that all the cybersecurity considerations are like embedded in the OT system design. everything from network segmentation, secure remote access, secure by design components, all of that stuff from the beginning, all the way through installation. And when you're talking about installation, you're talking about running vulnerability scans, pen testing, and things like that. And I think it's time for our organization or our industry to adopt a a an industry-wide accepted commissioning process. And I think when that happens, I think we'll get a lot closer to making sure the OD deployments are secure.
Greg mentioned about that you took off work to go coach your son, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about that because I'm going through football withdrawals. So.
Oh yeah, I've got a couple kids who play. My oldest son was drafted he played at the University of Louisville with Lamar Jackson. Yeah, he played with Lamar Jackson. He was a receiver, played with Lamar Jackson. He was a freshman All-American. Lamar left, and all of a sudden, all his production left with with Lamar.
Yeah.
And he was drafted by the Tennessee Titans in the fourth round 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago. Didn't go well there, and he's bounced around a little bit. Went to Pittsburgh, and now he's with the Chargers. He's with Harbaugh. With the Chargers. And
Nice.
my youngest played at Marshall last year. He started off at Michigan. Well, he started off at Louisville and left Louisville when his brother left. He played with his brother his senior year, but he was hurt the entire season. He had a coaching change. He left, went to Michigan State. Didn't get a ton of playing time there, got injured, and went to Marshall last year. I don't know if you remember, early in the season last year, there was this kid that made this crazy one-handed, backhanded catch in a game, and it was everywhere. It went viral.
Yeah.
It was on the Sports Center. Yeah,
I saw it.
That was my son, Christian Fitzpatrick.
Oh, yes. Nice.
Yeah, that was my son. So now
That's awesome.
yeah, he's trying to get a redshirt year back for an injury he had at Michigan State. So we're waiting. We'll probably hear something by the end of the week, but he's full blown into the draft process. He probably won't get drafted this year. That's why he wants to play another year because he had a super productive year last year. And he'll probably be a free agent if he doesn't get that extra year. But yeah, so he's in Tampa. Both of them are in Tampa right now training. Dez is training, getting ready for OTAs and mini camp, and Christian is training and waiting to see if he's going to get an extra year or if he's going to have to enter the draft and go ahead and report to training camp and try to win a spot. But they both play receiver.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Proud
yeah.
dad, I bet.
Yeah, actually, it's not as glamorous as people think. I'm always on pins
It's a
and
lot of
needles.
work.
Yeah, and you want to go to the games and just watch the games and enjoy the game and really not, think like a dad, but it's almost impossible, man, because unless you're a first or a second round draft choice, you're part of that roster that's constantly churning during the season. You can be there 1 week and have a bad game, and the next thing you know, you're on a practice squad or out of there completely. And GMs at the NFL level, their job is to work to make the team better even during the season. So the middle of the roster to the bottom of the roster, it's ever changing for certain teams. So he's just trying to find his foothold, my oldest, and stick somewhere. So we'll see what happens this year. But he's busting his butt.
Yeah, that's awesome. Best of luck to him on that too. That's fantastic.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, this was fun, guys. I hope I gave you enough.
You gave us quite a bit, Greg. Thank you for taking your time out of your schedule to talk about this, and it's really been quite eye-opening. And that's all we have for today. Remember to stay curious and practice proper hygiene. I'm Charles,
And I'm Matthew.
and this has been It's a Controls Problem.
We got DMX on the line.
Nailed it.